Okay, transportation. This is the national average, 29 tons per year. This is about where I was in 2007. So where's the low-lying fruit here?
Or at least in the Northwest, because we're kind of spoiled here because our electrical output is a lot more renewable than other parts of the country. The world percent total for CO2 emissions of industrial power generation is around 40%. So we're really, really kind of blessed here that we have more, maybe not from an ecological standpoint in some cases, but from a climate change standpoint, we have a much better power generation system here than, let's say, Ohio, where it's 90% coal. And in that case, home power and just making stuff is going to be a huge, huge improvement.
So what was so useful, I mean, these are really just broad average statistics, but it's really useful. It was really useful for me to see this, to realize. I thought that, you know, because I drive a Prius and I recycle and, you know, and I care about this stuff, I figured my carbon footprint would be smaller than the national average, but it wasn't. And most of this was air travel. So that was a big part of my motivation. Okay, all right. I got to do something a little different here. And so this was 2008. Wow. So just by eliminating car and jet, I mean, I still you know, use bus and train and all of that stuff during the year. Still had some carbon footprint, but that's what happened to my carbon footprint in the transportation category by doing that this year during 2008. Since that time, you know, I'm driving again. I'm not driving nearly as much. You know, we only have one car instead of two. Both Sally and I are really working hard to carpool whenever possible, ride our bikes. So it's, you know, it's come up a little bit, but nothing like it was before. But before I get too complacent, that's where, you know, I need to get to. So if you're interested in doing a carbon footprint, here is a good example. Okay, carbonfootprint.com/calculators. You know, if you Google carbon footprint calculator, there's a bunch of them, and they all have that same basic, you know, dividing it. It just asks you some really basic questions about what kind of car you drive, how big your house is, you know, how you heat it, and that kind of stuff. Really general, but it'll give you an idea. And again, if we can approach this with curiosity, you know, like curiosity, rather than feeling guilty or, you know, squeamish and I just don't even want to know. It helps to actually get some data. Where is the low-lying fruit? Where can I make some big changes in my carbon footprint by some relatively minor adjustments to how I go about, you know, my day? So I really encourage you to do that. How many of you here think that think that climate change is a hoax? Okay, not surprised, didn't see many hands, but if we were a random sampling of Americans sitting in this room, then half of your hands would have gone up. Climate change is a hoax. So this kind of steers us into the territory that I'm spending a lot of time now exploring, which is, you know, what is going on? Why aren't our brains green? You know, why is it that even people, you know, who don't think climate change is a hoax, and basically, how many of you basically accept the science that says that, you know, we actually have to make radical reductions in carbon emissions if we don't want to have catastrophic climate. How many think that's probably true? Okay. So how many of you are well on your way to to an 80% reduction in your own carbon footprint as a result of knowing that? Okay. So again, not out of blame, not out of judgment, but just, isn't that really interesting? How many of you are at least somewhat like me, bothered by that gap? Okay. I'm guessing you wouldn't be here tonight if there wasn't some conscience there about it. It's really interesting. There's lots of research going on here now about motivation and what prevents us from making these kinds of changes. And one of the things that they're finding is that, and this is true on the left as well as the right, almost equally actually, that if our facts are challenged, if my facts are challenged by someone, and in my case it would be someone who is probably saying that it's a hoax, or if I challenge, show all of these slides and stuff to someone who is convinced that it's a hoax, chances are they'll become even more committed to their position rather than giving ground. So there's something really interesting about the way our brains are wired. That we can, and we all do this, we can all look past our hugest contradictions and sort of obsess on little things that we're doing. Right? I mean, I know I can. Anyone else attest to that? So for me, I knew on some level for a long time that it was really a very high carbon deal to get on a jet plane, but I just didn't really know how huge that was in terms of the, just the proportion of my carbon footprint. So, I'm doing this all the time myself. So it takes a real kind of intellectual commitment and heart-open commitment to be willing to challenge ourselves on things that actually are going to mean some major disruption or change in the way we're doing things. So somehow, we just, it gets worse, and we just put on our gas masks, we just adapt. That the story of the frog in the water that's getting hotter, and you've all heard that one. So that's what I want us to talk about for a while. To know and not to do is not yet truly to know. So is that okay if we have a little conversation? So here's some questions that I think that come to mind, and maybe we can, with each of these, just start with your neighbor. First of all, let's find something to celebrate about some change that we've made, and it can be and it doesn't have to be in relation to climate change, but think of a gap. Think of, for you, one of those places where there is a gap between your convictions and values on the one hand, and how you're going about your daily life on the other. And you're aware that, maybe below the radar most of the time, but you're aware there's a gap. So think of one of those things. And think also about something that you have actually done to address that gap. And share that with your neighbor, okay? If you want to take a minute to think on that, and then just turn to a neighbor and take a couple minutes each.